10th of October 1943. USS Essex, CV-9, 150 miles northeast of Wake Island. The arc of a welder's torch flashes in the hangar deck darkness. A machinist's mate leans over a lathe, shaving metal from a damaged landing gear strut. The smell of hydraulic fluid mixes with hot steel and aviation fuel. This is not a shipyard. This is not Pearl Harbor. This is a carrier at war, operating deep in enemy waters. Japanese naval doctrine held a fundamental assumption. A carrier damaged in combat must withdraw to a major base for repair. Imperial planners calculated transit times of weeks or months. They based their attrition strategy on this belief. The reality unfolding on the hangar decks of American carriers was different. By late 1943, US Navy crews were performing depot-level engine replacements entirely at sea. What the enemy considered impossible was becoming routine. The war in the Pacific would be decided not just by battles, but by the ability to repair, recover, and return to the fight. The floating factory, 10th October 1943. Aboard USS Essex, CV-9, operating near Wake Island. The hangar deck of an Essex-class carrier stretches 654 feet long and 70 feet wide. At first glance, it appears to be organized chaos, but look closer. One bay houses a complete machine shop with lathes and milling machines. Another contains welding stations with oxygen acetylene rigs. A third bay is dedicated to sheet metal work with brake presses and shears. This is not merely a storage area for aircraft. This is a floating industrial complex. Allied naval planners understood that carriers were high-value targets. The Japanese, operating from their doctrine of limited repair capability, assumed significant damage would force an American carrier out of the combat theater for months. A damaged ship would need to transit thousands of miles to Pearl Harbor or the Bremerton Navy Yard on the west coast. The Essex-class carrier was designed to challenge this assumption. It was engineered as a self-contained industrial ecosystem. A machinist's mate, quoted in a US Navy Bureau of Ships report on carrier operations, described it this way: "We were a floating city, but we were also a floating factory. The flight deck was the storefront, but the hangar deck was where the real work of winning the war got done." The hangar deck was equipped for serious industrial work: machine shops, welding stations, sheet metal shops, specialized workshops for avionics repair, hydraulic systems, and engine overhaul. These were not minimal facilities for emergency patching. They were comprehensive workshops capable of major repairs. According to the ship's official specifications, an Essex-class carrier could perform up to 80% of all required aircraft and ship system repairs while underway. This included everything from patching flight decks to swapping the 2,000 horsepower Pratt & Whitney R2800 engines on its F6F Hellcats. Work that Japanese doctrine classified as depot-level maintenance was accomplished at sea, in the combat zone. This integrated repair capability fundamentally changed the logistics of naval warfare. It allowed US carrier task forces to remain on station in forward combat areas for extended periods. They could maintain a relentless operational tempo. The Japanese fleet, tied to its distant home ports, could not match this sustained pressure. By early 1944, a US carrier's crew could complete a full engine replacement on a Hellcat fighter in less than 8 hours, entirely at sea. This was depot-level work that, according to Japanese naval planning, was simply impossible without a land-based facility. The Organizational Machinery 1, May 1944. Headquarters, Commander Air Force, Pacific Fleet. An officer pins a new marker on a wall map of the Pacific. It indicates the location of a newly commissioned carrier aircraft service unit. These small, specialized detachments are being deployed to every forward anchorage and escort carrier in the fleet. The US Navy initially planned that only minor routine maintenance would be performed at sea. Combat experience in the Pacific demanded a far more robust system. The solution was a layered, standardized organization. It could handle everything from routine servicing to major battle damage repair, all within the combat theater. The key innovation was the creation and deployment of carrier aircraft service detachments and carrier aircraft service units. Each fleet carrier embarked a CSD of approximately 75 men. These were specialist mechanics and technicians who augmented the ship's company. They brought expertise in specific systems: radial engines, hydraulics, electronics, structural repair. Larger CASUs were stationed at forward bases like Majuro Atoll and Ulithi. These units provided depot-level overhaul capabilities. They acted as a backstop for the carrier's own workshops, handling jobs too complex or time-consuming for shipboard facilities. By the end of the war, the US Navy had commissioned 69 CASUs. This network of standardized repair units created a consistent, interchangeable system across the entire Pacific theater. Any carrier could receive the same level of technical support at any forward base. The system was modular, scalable, and reliable. This organizational structure created powerful synergy. The ship's own crew and its embarked CASD handled immediate repairs to keep aircraft flying. More complex jobs could be offloaded to a CASU at the next fleet anchorage. The most severe damage was handled by dedicated repair ships, the AR-class vessels, and by floating dry docks. It was a seamless, integrated chain of industrial power. Damage control, repair, recovery, and return to service, all executed within the combat theater. Captured Japanese intelligence documents from 1944 reveal a profound confusion. Japanese analysts vastly underestimated US aircraft availability rates. They could not account for a repair system that returned battle-damaged planes to service in hours instead of weeks. The floating continent 15th October 1944. Ulithi Atoll. A massive section of floating dry dock is towed into the vast lagoon. USS ABSD-1 is being assembled section by section. When complete, it will be capable of lifting a 45,000-ton battleship clear of the water. Ulithi was an uninhabited coral atoll just 1 year earlier. It has now become the largest forward naval base in the world. Japanese naval strategy was built on a geographic calculation. The vastness of the Pacific Ocean would force the US fleet to continually withdraw to main bases at Pearl Harbor or on the West Coast. This would give the Imperial Navy time to rest, regroup, and prepare for the next engagement. Distance was a strategic weapon. The reality was that the US Navy brought its bases forward. It brought them to the very edge of the combat zone. The Advanced Base Sectional Dock was the pinnacle of mobile repair infrastructure. An ABSD was comprised of 10 sections. Each section could be towed individually across the ocean. They were assembled in any deep water lagoon. Once joined, an ABSD could handle any ship in the fleet, including the largest Essex-class carriers and Iowa-class battleships. Admiral Chester Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet, understood the strategic value of these forward bases immediately. He wrote in a dispatch dated 18th of October 1944, "The establishment of the anchorage at Ulithi has multiplied the striking power of our fleet. Our ships can be repaired, rearmed, and re-provisioned at the very edge of the combat zone." The statistics are remarkable. Between October 1944 and October 1945, the floating dry docks and repair ships at forward bases like Ulithi and Manus Island performed work on over 7,000 US Navy vessels. From landing craft to battleships, torpedo damage, bomb damage, kamikaze strikes, all repaired within days or weeks instead of months. This forward-based floating infrastructure formed the final link in the repair chain. A carrier could absorb significant battle damage. Its crew would perform emergency repairs. The ship would proceed to Ulithi. There, repair ships and CASU personnel would patch the hull and restore critical systems. The carrier could then return to combat, all without ever leaving the Western Pacific. The system eliminated the tyranny of distance. The Japanese strategy of trading space for time collapsed. The American fleet was no longer a visitor to these waters. It had moved in permanently. Japanese reconnaissance planes flying over Ulithi in late 1944 reported a fleet anchorage larger than Pearl Harbor, complete with dry docks and supply depots. It was 1,400 miles closer to Japan than Pearl Harbor. The war had come to their doorstep, and it had brought its own factories with it. USS Franklin, Inferno at Sea, 19th of March 1945, 50 miles off the coast of Japan. The piercing shriek of the general quarters alarm. Then a colossal explosion. A single Japanese Yokosuka D-4Y Judy dive bomber has penetrated the combat air patrol. It drops two 500-pound bombs. Both penetrate the flight deck of USS Franklin CV-13. They detonate in the hangar deck amidst fully fueled and armed aircraft. The explosion ignites a chain reaction. Fuel tanks rupture. Bombs cook off. Rockets fire randomly across the hangar deck. Within minutes, secondary explosions tear through the ship. The Franklin is 50 miles from the Japanese coast. It is the closest any American carrier has operated to the enemy homeland. A hit of this magnitude on a carrier laden with fuel and munitions was expected to be a death sentence. The Japanese pilot who scored the hit almost certainly reported the carrier as sunk. According to pre-war doctrine, the Franklin should have been lost. The reality proved otherwise. It was a testament to the resilience of the ship and the determination of its crew. Lieutenant Commander Joseph T. O'Callaghan, the ship's Catholic chaplain, moved through fire and smoke. He organized damage control parties. He dragged wounded men to safety. He administered last rites to the dying. He would later be awarded the Medal of Honor. The citation read, "Courage and gallant spirit in the face of extreme peril." The crew of the Franklin fought the inferno with every tool available: high-pressure fire hoses, steam smothering systems in the hangar bay. Damage control teams wearing asbestos suits jettisoned live bombs and ammunition over the side. Welders worked to patch the gaping holes in the flight deck, even as explosions continued below. The battle to save the ship lasted hours. The official Naval History and Heritage Command Action Report, documented as HGram 043, provides the timeline. Despite suffering over 800 casualties, the highest on any US warship that survived the war, the Franklin's crew had the fires under control within 6 hours. The ship was stabilized. The survival of the Franklin was proof of concept. Navy's design philosophy emphasized robust compartmentalization and damage control, redundant systems, trained crews, the ability to isolate damaged sections and maintain critical functions. The Franklin was too heavily damaged to continue combat operations, but its own crew saved it. The ship limped to Ulithi for temporary repairs. Then it made the long journey home under its own power, over 12,000 miles from the coast of Japan to the Brooklyn Navy Yard. Even as the ship burned on the 19th of March, its aircraft that had been airborne during the attack were recovered by other carriers in the task force. The USS Hancock took them aboard. The air group remained operational. The mission continued. USS Bunker Hill, kamikaze onslaught, 11th May 1945, off the coast of Okinawa. From the bridge of a nearby destroyer, the view is of a pillar of black smoke. USS Bunker Hill, CV-17, has been hit by 2 kamikaze aircraft within 30 seconds. The first crashed through the flight deck. Its bomb detonated in the gallery deck. The second hit near the island's superstructure. Its fuel and bomb ignited aircraft on the flight deck. The Japanese kamikaze strategy was designed to inflict catastrophic, overwhelming damage. A successful hit was expected to completely destroy the target ship. Imperial planners believed this tactic would remove American carriers from the war permanently, one by one. The Bunker Hill suffered over 600 casualties. Many pilots died in their ready rooms, trapped by fire. The damage was severe: flight deck destroyed, island structure gutted, fires burning out of control. But the ship did not sink. Damage control teams fought back. They contained the fires. They shored up damaged bulkheads. They maintained propulsion and steering. The ship remained afloat and under control. The Bunker Hill's action report documents the immediate response. Onboard machine shops began fabricating patches for ruptured fuel and water lines. Electricians worked to bypass destroyed circuits. These shipboard repairs were critical to maintaining the ship's stability and preventing catastrophic flooding. Within 24 hours, the fires were extinguished. The ship could maneuver under its own power, but it could not continue combat operations. The flight deck was unusable. The island was destroyed. The Bunker Hill was withdrawn from the front line and sent to Ulithi. There, repair ship crews and CASU personnel performed temporary structural patching. They welded steel plates over holes. They restored electrical power to critical systems. They made the ship seaworthy for the long transit home. This temporary repair work at Ulithi allowed the carrier to safely navigate thousands of miles back to the Puget Sound Navy Yard. There it would receive a complete rebuild. The afloat repair base acted as a crucial triage station. It saved a capital ship that might otherwise have been lost at sea. The USS Bunker Hill would be fully repaired and returned to service after the war. The kamikaze had wounded the ship severely, but the industrial system supporting it ensured the ship would not be killed. The Unseen War of Maintenance, 15th of December 1944. Hangar deck, USS Ticonderoga, CV-14, South China Sea. An F-6F Hellcat sits with its engine cowling removed. A team of 6 mechanics surrounds it. They work with practiced efficiency, unbolting the massive Pratt & Whitney R2800 radial engine from its mounts. Each bolt is precisely numbered and logged. The 2,000 horsepower engine weighs over 2,300 pounds. A replacement engine already waits on a mobile stand nearby. It has been pre-inspected and tested. The swap will take less than 8 hours from start to finish. Japanese naval aviation doctrine treated aircraft as largely disposable assets. High attrition rates were expected and accepted. Major maintenance required a return to a land-based depot. Damaged aircraft were often written off rather than repaired. The American approach was fundamentally different. Aircraft were treated as repairable, recoverable assets. The carrier itself was the primary maintenance facility. Each carrier was equipped for comprehensive aircraft maintenance. Engine stands with hydraulic lifts, riveting jigs for structural repair, hydraulic testing benches, a full suite of machine tools including lathes, mills and drill presses. Oxygen acetylene welding equipment, paint and fabric doping facilities. A KSD team could perform remarkable work, patching bullet holes in control surfaces with doped fabric, completely rebuilding a damaged wing section, replacing damaged hydraulic lines, overhauling landing gear, repairing radios and radar systems. A US Navy pilot, in an oral history interview archived at the National Museum of Naval Aviation, described it this way. You'd come back with your plane shot to hell, thinking it was a write-off. You'd go get a few hours of sleep, and when you came back to the hangar deck, the mechanics would have it patched, rearmed and ready to go. They were wizards. This relentless 24-hour-a-day cycle of maintenance and repair kept aircraft availability rates consistently high, often above 90%. It allowed a carrier air group to sustain a high sortie rate day after day. During intense campaigns like Iwo Jima and Okinawa, this sustained pressure ground down enemy air power through sheer persistence. The statistics tell the story. During one documented week of the Marianas Campaign in June 1944, the combined maintenance efforts of a single Essex-class carrier's air department and embarked CSD increased operational aircraft availability from 76% to 94%. This was accomplished while the carrier was conducting daily combat strikes. The ship itself, 25th of November 1944. Off the coast of Luzon, Philippines, a damage control officer inspects a 40mm Bofors anti-aircraft gun mount. A near miss from a kamikaze has peppered it with shrapnel. The traverse mechanism is jammed. The elevation gear housing is cracked. A team of machinists' mates and gunners' mates is already disassembling the mount. They will machine a replacement gear, weld the cracked housing, reassemble and test the weapon. The work will take 14 hours. The gun will be back in service before the next dawn general quarters. Japanese military planners focused on sinking carriers. They assumed any significant damage to ship systems would effectively neutralize the vessel. Damaged catapults, fouled arresting gear, jammed rudders, all would require a return to a major shipyard. They underestimated the US Navy's ability to repair not just aircraft, but the ship itself, while remaining in the combat zone. The same workshops that serviced aircraft were responsible for maintaining the ship's complex machinery. When USS Intrepid, CV-11, was hit by a kamikaze on the 25th of November 1944, the blast damaged a hydraulic catapult accumulator. Without functioning catapults, the carrier could not launch fully loaded strike aircraft. The ship's crew repaired the damaged accumulator in less than 24 hours. They fabricated new seals, re-welded cracked housings, bled and recharged the hydraulic system. Full launch capability was restored without leaving the combat zone. Ship's logs from multiple carriers record similar achievements. Repair of main propulsion turbines, flight deck plating, fire control radar systems, all accomplished at sea, often with assistance from specialized technicians aboard accompanying repair ships. This capability to perform multi-system repairs at sea meant carriers could absorb damage and continue functioning as effective combat units. A hit that might force a Japanese carrier to withdraw for months could often be mitigated on a US carrier in days or hours. During the Okinawa campaign from April to June 1945, US carriers sustained dozens of kamikaze hits. Some hits were catastrophic, like those on Franklin and Bunker Hill. Many others caused significant but repairable damage. Not a single Essex-class carrier was sunk by a kamikaze. Their ability to repair themselves was a form of armor the enemy could not penetrate. The Endless Chain 5, January 1945. At sea, replenishment rendezvous point option. The aircraft carrier USS Lexington, CV-16, steams in parallel with a fleet oiler, USS Neosho, AO-48. The two ships maintain a precise separation of 150 feet. Thick fuel hoses are suspended between them. The carrier is taking on thousands of gallons of aviation gasoline. This is underway replenishment, abbreviated UNREP. It is happening hundreds of miles from the nearest land. The process will continue for 3 hours. The Japanese fleet operated as a tethered force. Ships needed to return to port to refuel and rearm. Operating time in the combat zone was limited by fuel capacity and ammunition stocks. Extended operations required withdrawal to secure anchorages or home ports. The US Pacific Fleet, through its massive logistics train, became a self-sustaining mobile entity. It could operate indefinitely in enemy waters. The logistics fleet was the true unseen arsenal, a vast armada of support ships, fleet oilers like the Neosho, ammunition ships packed with bombs, rockets, and shells, provision ships carrying food and supplies, specialized aircraft transport carriers, usually escort carriers that ferried replacement planes from factories in the United States directly to the combat zone. This fleet train met combat task forces at sea. Carriers could be refueled, rearmed, and reprovisioned without ever leaving the fight. A typical Essex-class carrier carried 240,000 gallons of aviation fuel, enough for several days of intensive air operations. But its real endurance was limited only by the logistics chain. The UNREP process allowed continuous resupply. Fuel, ammunition, spare parts, everything from complete replacement engines to electronic components to welding rods. The statistics of the logistics operation are staggering. During the 30-day campaign for Iwo Jima in February and March 1945, the US Fifth Fleet was resupplied at sea with 6 million barrels of fuel oil, 28,000 tons of ammunition, over 500 replacement aircraft, all delivered while the fleet remained on station, maintaining continuous pressure on the enemy. This fully integrated supply chain was the lifeblood of the afloat repair system. The workshops on carriers and facilities at Ulithi were useless without a constant flow of materials. Spare engines, steel plates, welding rods, propellers, hydraulic seals, electronic components. The logistics train delivered everything the repair system needed to function. The Industrial Climax Chapter 9, The Doctrinal Mismatch, 20th April 1945, Imperial Japanese Navy General Staff Headquarters, Tokyo. An intelligence officer presents a new analysis to senior staff. The subject is US carrier operations off Okinawa. The numbers are baffling, contradictory, impossible. Confirmed kamikaze hits on multiple carriers, yet American sortie rates have barely decreased. If anything, they appear to be increasing. The enemy fleet seems to be healing itself. Japanese naval doctrine was built around a single foundational concept, the decisive battle, Kantai Kessen. Victory would belong to the side with superior spirit, tactics, and initial striking power. Attrition favored the defender who struck first and hardest. The American doctrine, proven by 1945, was entirely different. Industrial attrition. Victory belonged to the side that could absorb damage, repair it, and continue fighting. The side with deeper reserves and faster recovery. Post-war analysis by the US Strategic Bombing Survey confirmed this doctrinal gap. Japanese planners consistently overestimated the effectiveness of their attacks. They evaluated damage based on their own repair capabilities. A Japanese carrier hit by bombs would be out of action for 6 months or more. They assumed American carriers would face the same constraints. This was a fundamental misunderstanding of American industrial power. Japanese analysts could not conceive of a carrier that could replace an engine at sea. They could not imagine a floating dry dock capable of lifting a battleship in a forward lagoon. They could not comprehend a supply chain that delivered complete replacement aircraft to the combat zone. This doctrinal blindness led Japan to embrace the kamikaze tactic as a potential war-winning strategy. The calculation was simple. Trade one pilot and one plane for one aircraft carrier. If each kamikaze achieved a kill, the mathematics favored Japan. They had thousands of planes and pilots to expend. But the exchange rate was never 1-for-1. The US afloat repair system made it far worse for Japan. A kamikaze might damage a carrier. The carrier would repair itself and return. The plane and pilot were still lost. The math became unsustainable. A captured Japanese naval intelligence report from late 1944, now archived at the National Institute for Defense Studies in Tokyo, expressed disbelief at American capabilities. It referred to the US fleet's resilience as an operational miracle of industrial mobility at sea. Synergy in the lagoon, 12th of February 1945. Ulithi Atoll. A battle-damaged F-6F Hellcat approaches the lagoon. It cannot return to its own carrier. Hydraulic failure has locked its landing gear in an unsafe position. The pilot is diverted to USS Bougainville CVE-100, an escort carrier serving as a temporary casualty aircraft reception ship. The damaged plane makes a careful, arrested landing on the escort carrier. Within minutes, it is hoisted onto the deck by crane. A CASU team is waiting. They immediately begin assessment. In the Japanese system, a damaged aircraft that could not return to its carrier was often a total loss. If it could not make a land base, it was abandoned. Recovery and repair of damaged aircraft at sea was considered impractical. The American system treated every damaged aircraft as a recoverable asset. Another input for the repair machine. The integration of shipboard and forward base repair created remarkable efficiency. A fleet carrier returning from a combat strike could offload its most heavily damaged aircraft to the CASU at Ulithi. This freed valuable hangar deck space for servicing the aircraft needed for the next mission. The CASU would then repair the damaged planes over days or weeks. Once restored to operational status, they entered a replacement pool. They were ready to be issued to the next carrier that needed them. Aircraft were treated as interchangeable fleet assets, not permanently assigned to specific ships. This system created incredible operational tempo. A carrier could enter Ulithi in the morning, offload damaged aircraft, take on replacement aircraft from the pool, rearm with bombs and ammunition, refuel, take on spare parts and supplies, be ready to sail for the front lines by evening. The synergy between the carrier's own repair capabilities and the depot-level facilities at forward anchorages was the strategic multiplier. It ensured that the cutting edge of American naval power, the carrier air group, was always as sharp as possible. Japanese pilots who survived combat missions reported a puzzling phenomenon. They attacked the same US carriers day after day. They scored hits, they saw damage. Yet the same ships returned. They could not comprehend that the damage they inflicted had already been repaired. Chapter 11, The Unsinkable Fleet, 16 April 1945. The waters off Okinawa, Radar Picket Station 1. The flight deck of USS Intrepid, CV-11, is a scene of controlled urgency. A damage control party has just finished clearing wreckage from a kamikaze hit. The impact punched a hole through the flight deck. Burning fuel ignited aircraft parked nearby. Now a repair team moves in. They are working against a self-imposed deadline. 76 minutes to restore flight operations. Welders begin cutting steel plates to size. They will weld a patch over the hole while the ship continues to maneuver. The Japanese sent over 1,900 kamikaze sorties during the Battle of Okinawa. The special attack units, Tokubetsu Kogekitai, represented Japan's final, desperate strategy. The goal was to sink the American fleet. One ship at a time, one plane, one pilot, one carrier. They succeeded in sinking several destroyers and smaller vessels. The losses were painful, but they did not sink a single Essex-class fleet carrier. This was the decisive fact of the Okinawa campaign. The ability of US carriers to absorb and repair damage defeated the kamikaze strategy. USS Franklin survived catastrophic hits on the 19th of March. USS Bunker Hill survived 2 kamikazes on the 11th of May. USS Ticonderoga CV-14 was hit on the 21st January. Repaired at Ulithi, returned to combat. USS Hancock CV-19 was hit on the 7th of April. Repaired its own flight deck at sea. Resumed operations within days. USS Intrepid was hit multiple times during the campaign. Each time, damage control teams contained the fires. Repair teams patched the holes. Flight operations resumed. The ship refused to leave the combat zone. The afloat repair system effectively defeated the kamikaze tactic. It transformed what should have been devastating, mission-killing blows into survivable, repairable damage. It proved that in a war of attrition, the ability to recover from a hit is more important than the ability to avoid one. By late May 1945, Japanese naval planners were forced to conclude that their ultimate weapon had failed. The American fleet seemed unsinkable. Not because the ships were invulnerable, but because they could repair themselves and return to battle. Resolution and Legacy Chapter 12, A Victory of Systems 2nd September 1945. Tokyo Bay. The flight decks of US carriers anchored in Tokyo Bay are packed wingtip to wingtip with aircraft, a final massive display of air power. The surrender ceremony is being conducted aboard battleship USS Missouri, BB-63. Representatives of the Japanese government sign the instrument of surrender. Many of the carriers bear the scars of battle, patched steel on flight decks, welded repairs on island superstructures. They are veterans. They survived. The US Navy's ability to repair and maintain its fleet at sea was a decisive strategic advantage. It shortened the war. It saved lives. It allowed continuous, relentless pressure on the Japanese home islands. The enemy's military was strangled. Their economy collapsed. The fleet never needed to withdraw. Of the 24 Essex-class carriers built during the war, not one was lost to enemy action. 0. This was not luck. It was the combination of robust design, superb damage control training, and an unparalleled mobile repair infrastructure. The 69 Cassews, the fleet of repair ships, the floating dry docks, the logistics train, the UN rep system, all of it working together seamlessly. They ensured the fleet's resilience. The victory in the Pacific was not just a victory of ships and planes. It was a victory of systems. The triumph of an industrial and logistical philosophy that the Japanese Empire could not match. They did not fully comprehend it until defeat was inevitable. In the final year of the war, the US Pacific Fleet inflicted more damage on the enemy while receiving more damage itself than at any other point. Yet its operational strength continued to grow. New carriers joined the fleet. Damaged carriers were repaired and returned. The industrial machine could not be stopped. The legacy of the floating factory, present day. A US Navy carrier battle group on deployment. On the hangar deck of a modern Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, technicians work in a state-of-the-art workshop. Advanced diagnostic equipment. Computer-controlled machine tools. They are troubleshooting the engine of an FA-18 Super Hornet. The technology has changed, the scale has evolved, but the principle remains the same. The carrier is a floating industrial base. It can repair, maintain, and sustain itself far from home ports. The lessons of World War II's afloat repair system became foundational to modern naval doctrine. The concept of the carrier battle group as a self-sustaining entity is a direct legacy. Modern carrier groups can deploy for months at a time. They operate thousands of miles from the United States. The mobile industrial system perfected in the Pacific made this possible. A post-war assessment by the Naval History and Heritage Command concluded, to the Japanese, ship repair belonged to the shore. They had never imagined a warship that could function as a factory, replacing engines, patching decks, and returning aircraft to the sky in a matter of hours. This doctrinal blindness was a critical factor in their defeat. The Second World War in the Pacific was won by many factors: superior industrial capacity, better intelligence, tactical innovation, courageous sailors and pilots. But chief among them was an industrial philosophy that did not end at the water's edge. The United States put not just its navy to sea, it put its factories afloat. In doing so, it created an unstoppable and resilient force that changed the face of naval warfare forever.